The baby's lips were blue when the Hell's Angel found them. A 6-year-old and an infant, abandoned on a frozen bench in a Christmas Eve blizzard. The boy screamed when he saw the tattooed giant pull out a knife, but Chase wasn't there to hurt them. He was there to give them the only thing that had kept him alive for 20 years. And what happened 6 hours later would make even a sheriff question who the real monsters are. The wind on the Continental Divide doesn't howl, it screams. Chase Weaver leaned into the blizzard, his Harley engine roaring defiance at the white wall ahead. Ice crystals peppered his face like buckshot. The highway was invisible beneath 6 inches of fresh powder. Most men would have pulled over 20 miles back. But Chase wasn't riding to get somewhere. He was riding to forget. 30 years ago tonight, his daughter died. Same snow. Same silence afterward. He twisted the throttle harder. The bike fishtailed, and he corrected with muscle memory older than some men's marriages. The cold had stopped registering an hour ago. Now it was just noise. White noise to drown out the memory of a 5-year-old girl in a hospital bed, asking if Santa knew where heaven was. Mile marker 82 appeared through the storm like a gravestone. Then he saw it, a flash of red on the roadside bench. Chase's hands squeezed the brake before his brain caught up. The Harley skidded sideways, kicking up a rooster tail of snow. He planted his boot, steadying 1,500 pounds of chrome and fury. His heart hammered against his ribs, the first thing he'd felt in hours. Red, like the ribbon she'd worn in her hair that last Christmas. He killed the engine. The silence hit him like a fist. No traffic, no movement, just wind and darkness and that impossible splash of color 40 feet away. It's nothing. A tarp, a discarded coat, but his legs were already swinging off the bike. His boots punched through the drifts with muffled thuds. The leather of his cut creaked with each step, frozen stiff. 10 feet away, he could make out shapes, small shapes, huddled on the bench. 5 feet away, he heard it, a child's voice, thin and breaking. "Please don't hurt us, mister." Chase stopped. The boy couldn't have been older than 6. He wore that red jacket, oversized, torn at the sleeve. In his arms, wrapped in a ratty blanket, a baby, maybe 6 months old. The infant wasn't crying. That was worse. The boy's eyes were huge, white-rimmed with terror. He was looking at Chase the way a rabbit looks at a wolf. And Chase knew what he saw. A 6'4" wall of leather and patches, beard crusted with ice, ink crawling up his neck like prison bars. Chase's hand moved to his belt. The boy flinched. "Easy," Chase said. His voice came out rust and gravel. He pulled his buck knife. The boy whimpered. But Chase wasn't reaching for him. He was kneeling in the snow, reaching beneath his bike. The brass guardian bell hung there, tarnished and dented, tied to the frame with leather cord. It had protected him for 20 years, kept the road spirits away, kept him alive when he'd had no business being alive. He cut it free with one stroke. The boy's teeth were chattering so hard it sounded like dice rattling in a cup. Chase stepped forward, slowly, like approaching a spooked horse, and pressed the bell into the kid's frozen hand. "You hold this," Chase growled. "Long as this bell rings, the monsters can't touch you." The boy's fingers closed around it. The bell gave a small, clear chime. Chase looked at the baby. Her lips were blue. "What's your name, kid?" "P. Promise. And this is Ariel." "Sir," the boy's voice cracked. "My baby sister is freezing." Chase's jaw tightened. He looked back at his bike, then at the empty highway disappearing into the storm. He had 2 choices, and somewhere in the howling dark, he heard an engine. Chase didn't wait for permission. He unzipped his leather cut with stiff fingers, opened it wide. "Give her here." Promise hesitated, clutching Ariel tighter. The baby's eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow. "Now, kid." The boy handed her over. Chase tucked the infant inside his vest, zipping her against his bare chest. The shock of her cold skin made him grunt. She felt impossibly small, fragile as a bird. He felt her heart beating, rapid, weak, but there. He yanked his heavy leather belt free from his jeans. "Turn around." "W what?" "You're riding with me. Turn around and put your back against mine." Promise obeyed, still gripping the guardian bell like a lifeline. Chase threaded the belt around both their waists, cinching it tight. The boy's spine pressed against his kidneys. "You drop that bell," Chase said. "Oh no. You let go of me, we both die. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Chase threw his leg over the Harley and kicked it to life. The engine's roar was swallowed by the wind. He didn't bother with the headlight. It was useless in this whiteout. He was riding on instinct now, on memory, on 20 years of knowing this highway like the lines on his palm. The bike lurched forward. The storm hit them like a wall. Snow needled Chase's face, turning his beard to ice. The wind tried to rip them sideways off the road. He leaned into it, using his weight as ballast, feeling Promise's small body jerking with each pothole hidden beneath the drifts. Ting, ting, ting. The bell. Promise was ringing it against Chase's back, over and over, a frantic rhythm. The kid was terrified, but he was holding on. Chase felt Ariel shift against his chest. A tiny movement, her legs kicking weakly. Alive. Still alive. His arms burned from fighting the handlebars. His lungs screamed for air that didn't feel like swallowing razors. The cold was seeping through the adrenaline now, making his reaction sluggish. Dangerous. Then he saw it, through the swirling white, a glow. Red and yellow. Neon letters bleeding color into the storm. Sally's Diner. 200 yards. Maybe less. Chase twisted the throttle. The bike surged forward, and the engine coughed, sputtered. The whole machine shuddered beneath them, the RPM dropping fast. Ice in the fuel line. Or worse, 100 yards to the parking lot. The engine died. They were coasting now, momentum and prayer, the diner lights getting closer, but the bike was slowing. Promise screamed, "We're gonna make it. Right? Right." Chase's boot kicked the diner door open hard enough to crack the frame. The heat hit them like a fist, blessed, burning, alive. The smell of coffee and cherry pie and fryer grease wrapped around them. A Johnny Cash song played low on the jukebox. 3 heads at the counter turned. Jesus Christ, cheesy. A woman in her 50s rushed from behind the counter, wiping her hands on a grease-stained apron. Sally. She'd been pouring coffee in this place since Reagan was president. Chase was already unzipping his vest, his fingers numb and clumsy. Ariel tumbled into Sally's arms, blue-lipped, trembling, but her eyes were open now. Aware. She needs warming. Slowly. Chase's voice was hoarse. Not too fast, or her heart. I know. Sally was already moving toward the back booth, grabbing blankets from the storage closet. Promise, baby, come here. Let's get these wet clothes off you. The boy stumbled forward, still clutching the brass bell. His legs barely held him. Chase caught him by the shoulder before he collapsed. You did good, kid. Promise looked up at him with eyes too old for 6 years. Is she gonna die? No. One word. A promise Chase had no business making, but the boy needed to hear it. Sally worked fast, stripping Ariel's wet blanket, wrapping her in fleece, tucking hot water bottles around her tiny body. Promise stood shivering in soaked jeans and that red jacket, his teeth still chattering. Chase shrugged off his massive leather cut, the one with the Hell's Angels patch on the back, the rocker that read Nomad, the bloodstains no amount of washing could fully erase. He draped it over Promise's shoulders. The boy disappeared inside it. The leather hung to his ankles like a king's cloak. The patches covered his chest like armor. He looked up at Chase with something new in his eyes. Trust. At the counter, one of the truckers, a thick-necked man with a Peterbilt cap, raised his coffee mug an inch. A silent salute. The two others nodded. No words. They'd seen the bike outside, the patches, the way Chase moved. They knew what he was. They also knew what he'd just done. Game recognizes game. Chase poured himself coffee with shaking hands. The warmth in his chest wasn't just from the heat. It was something older. Something he thought he'd lost 30 years ago on a snowy night just like this one. Then he saw the headlights. A beat-up sedan, primer gray, one headlight out, skidded into the parking lot. It fishtailed on the ice, slammed into a snowbank, reversed hard. The driver's door flew open. Chase's entire body went rigid. He knew that car, knew the way it moved, desperate, erratic, wrong. Sally saw his face. Chase! He didn't answer. He walked to the booth, crouched down to Promise's eye level. The boy was wrapped in his cut, holding the bell. Listen to me, Chase said quietly. You ring that bell if you get scared. Understand? You ring it loud. The diner door crashed open. A man stumbled in, wild-eyed, twitching, smelling of cigarettes and chemical sweat. Behind him, a woman with hollowed cheeks and scabbed arms. Promise's whole body went stiff. The man's eyes locked on the booth. There you are, you little shit. Chase didn't move. He stayed seated in the booth, one arm around Promise, the other cradling Ariel against his chest. His eyes locked on the man, Roy, the name tag on his stained Jiffy Lube shirt half peeled off. That biker stole our kids. Roy jabbed a finger at Chase. His pupils were pinpricks. Meth. Maybe a 3-day bender. I'm taking them home. Right now. The woman behind him, Crystal, was worse. Her face was a battlefield of picked sores. She kept scratching her arms, leaving red trails. We just want to get cigarettes. We were coming back. You left them on a bench, Sally said from behind the counter, her voice ice. In a blizzard. Mind your own business, bitch. Roy took a step forward. Chase still didn't stand. Didn't raise his voice. Just shifted his weight slightly, putting his body between the threat and the children. You don't want to do this, Chase said quietly. The hell I don't. Roy's hand went to his belt. Steel flashed. A hunting knife, 7-inch blade. Those kids come with state checks. They're mine. The diner door opened again. Sheriff Miller stepped in, snow on his shoulders, hand instinctively moving toward his holster. His eyes swept the scene. The knife, the biker with patches, the children. Everybody stay calm. But Roy was already moving, the knife raised. Chase braced to stand. 3 chairs scraped simultaneously. The truckers rose as one. No words. No warning. Just 3 walls of flannel and denim. 6'2", 6'4", built like the rigs they drove. They stepped forward in perfect unison, boots hitting the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a war drum. They formed a line between Roy and the booth. Arms crossed, faces blank, a wall of silent working-class justice. Roy's knife hand wavered. You can't. Drop it. The Peterbilt trucker's voice was gravel. Now. Sheriff Miller's hand tightened on his weapon, trying to read the room. The hysterical tweakers. The knife. The calm bikers still seated, protecting an infant. The stone-faced truckers. Then Promise stood up on the booth seat, still wrapped in Chase's massive cut. He held up the brass bell, and it chimed once, clear and pure. He gave me the magic bell, Promise said, his voice steady now. Strong. He's the protector. The sheriff's eyes moved from the bell to Chase's face. Roy lunged. The truckers moved faster. And in the chaos of bodies and shouting, Chase felt Ariel's tiny hand curl around his finger and squeeze. The truckers pinned Roy against the wall until Sheriff Miller cuffed him. Crystal was arrested in the parking lot, trying to flee, both charged with child endangerment and assault. Nobody. The territory was clean. EMTs checked the kids, mild hypothermia, nothing permanent. Social services tracked down the grandmother by dawn, Margaret Hughes. She'd been searching for them for 3 weeks, ever since Roy took off with her grandchildren chasing his next high. She wept when she held them. Chase stood in the corner, watching. Margaret looked at him, this massive, patched outlaw who'd save her babies, and didn't flinch. "Thank you," she whispered. Chase nodded once. He knew what came next. He was a convicted felon, a Hell's Angel. He couldn't keep them, but he could keep them safe. 6 months later, summer. The white picket fence needed paint, but the yard was full of laughter. Promise pushed Ariel on a tire swing, the brass guardian bell hanging from his belt loop. Then he heard it, that specific engine rumble, low, throaty, unmistakable. Promise's head snapped up. He ran to the fence, bell jangling, watching the Harley cruise slowly down the gravel road. Chase rode past, beard trimmed, eyes hidden behind aviators. He didn't stop. He tapped his horn twice. Beep beep. Promise waved frantically, grinning ear to ear. The Harley turned into the driveway of the trailer on the adjacent lot, the one Chase had bought 3 months ago. Close enough to hear if anyone screamed. Close enough to respond if that bell ever rang in fear. The wolf had become the watchdog. Blood might make you related, but loyalty makes you family.